Ah, welcome back, everybody. Uh, Today, I wanted to talk about the need for cultural elites in an international state system. But first, today we got the Italico brand, Rosso Arabico. I am very fond of these ones. I'm already halfway through the pack. Italico is one of my favorites. I think this one is Kentucky Leaf, which is wood fired rather than sun dried. And it's grown in the Toscana region, I believe. So, yeah, rich soil. It's very flavorful. And then, of course, you've got the woody aroma, which is actually quite strong. The way they've infused it by fire drying it with, uh, I forget what wood it is, but it's very fragrant wood, so you can smell it on the cigar. So yeah, let's get started. Ah, I have already had numerous coffees today, so um, I'm not currently having a coffee. Excellent. So I think I wanted to make an argument on this subject because I feel like currently what we're seeing a lot of in terms of elitist behavior and how statecraft is being conducted and how countries are led, we're seeing a lot of issues um, in the way that diplomacy is being carried out, statecraft is being carried out. It's lovely. It's it's not reminiscent of centuries past and the type of statecraft that we used to see from elites. Um, I mean, medieval times, Byzantium, Roman, Athenian. There's definitely been a I would argue a gradual decay in the methods and trainings that top quality elites would invest in order to in some regards and by some philosophers standards in order to justify their position as elites. um I think there's been I've seen discussion on this on how cultural attainment and uh the sort of cultural capital that has been developed by the elite class is a natural defense mechanism against um, the inherent, I guess, in some regards, the inherent inequality, but more so the deservedness factor of elites in their positions. Um, because the argument has always been that, I mean, since the dawn of time, that you know elites have a lot of the time too much, right? I mean, too much capital, too much power, too much wealth, and in order to negate that, there has to be uh, a value added interaction with the populist, well, not with the with the popular, with the population, with the popular people, basically. Um, there has to be a value added transaction there. I mean, we saw this in we saw this in Venice with the Venetians, um, the House of Medici and other um, relevant houses in that time period were all very keen to implement their political will and, you know, extract resources and finances from the country. But in order to keep the general population happy, there was regular investment. There was, great artworks. Venice itself is very, very beautiful, and there is a reason for that. A lot of investment went into this from elite classes in order to placate populations into um, believing that their wealth and their power was deserved and also beneficial to them, the people. So I think this is a very interesting concept. I think when we think about this in terms of what the elites do today, I mean, take Athens in the well, I mean, before the Roman Empire even existed, a lot of elites would put their kids through rigorous social, scientific, and diplomatic training, language learning, etc., so forth, in order to prep them for future statecraft and future governance roles, right? Even if they were, you know, a glorified merchant class, either, you know, ascension through, as we see in Byzantium, ascension through the clerical class, or um, you know, growth of a financial empire. It was critical that these people knew politics, diplomacy, statecraft, and other finer elements of culture, music. The list goes on. Music, languages, there's a long list to that. So I think this has always been present, and throughout history, I think it's fluctuated. I don't think it's, elites, like all things. There's cycles, and there's peaks and troughs, and um, you know, we see great examples of tyrannical Roman emperors who were neither deserving nor effective in their statecraft, and would, either be playboys or flaunt this idea of, um, you know, giving something back to the people. And I feel we've come back to that in terms of the current elites in countries today. Um, it's been seemingly a long time since we've seen any sort of elitist investment in popular cultures, well, in popular culture, in the sense of, I mean, philanthropy to your, favorite museum, I guess does count, even if it's for a tax break. But a lot of the time, the exclusivity of the institutions that they donate to and that they partake in exclude a lot of the population from ever benefiting from the philanthropic investments that they have accumulated by exploitation of the working class. And I know this all sounds very Marxist, but trust me, it's it's not meant to be. Um, this is, I mean, it seems more so a fact of life that, there will always be a hierarchy, core and periphery, and, the global north and the global south, we always seem to drive for distinction. We always seem to drive for uh, exceptionalism, right? As humans in a social setting. So the idea that all of a sudden humankind is, hierarchical, and even on a world stage it becomes hierarchical, and this is strange. It's not really. I mean, I think that's just human nature. But but this idea that we're um we're distinction seeking is, I think, caveated by the fact that we also need to feel like and imply that we are deserving of because, again, if it's just pure luck, and if it's just nepotism, and there's no like construct of deserving or undeserving, then it becomes an issue of legitimacy, right? It's why royal families would argue that their bloodline is pure, and their you know dynasty is chosen by God, because otherwise any family would be worthy of such a title, and so anybody could compete, right? I mean, that's kind of the idea of democracy, and on a very basic level, this idea of democracy and low barrier to entry into global markets is, it's, oh, anyone is like, we're all equal and anyone can compete. And well, this idea of we're all equal is ironically contradictory to hierarchical societal structure, and elitism, and these other concepts that we partake in. I mean, capitalism itself is hierarchical, even though it argues that it's any access to anyone, and there's an equal uh, there's like an equal methodology, equal footing, so to speak, for attainment. Um, so this is, I think, an interesting concept, and I feel like, going back to what I was originally discussing, there is definitely uh, almost it's a detraction now from deservedness via work, and via exemplary performance, right? I mean, if you spoke, if you're from an affluent background and you speak 7 languages, the there's an implication that you worked very hard in order to learn that. Of course, you need to have a certain level of cultural capital, or cultural exposure, or a certain level of stability in order to be able to pursue that as either a profession, well, not necessarily a profession, but just to pursue that in general. So the sort of implicit and the explicit there is that, despite you having access to the capital, which is the implicit, the explicit is that you still worked for it, which is what would be a focus on, by elites. That, and I mean, if you listen to any speeches from elites who are born into wealth and born into into capital, there's a very big disconnect between their expressive, um, the implicit and the explicit, right? The expressions that are used are very, they did it by themselves, they worked hard, and the implicit is, well, they had a small loan of $1 million, right? I mean, Donald Trump said it himself, but what a lot of these people don't say is that part out loud, which again, in the pop population's eyes, I mean, anyone could argue, oh, if I had a million, uh, I wouldn't have, you know, gone bankrupt 7 times or however many it was in the end for DJT before he became uh, a big businessman. But that aside, I think, I mean, there's a lot more examples of this sort of behavior and this sort of expressionism from elites. I mean, there's a really nice study that I like, that it was a controlled scientific study, and it showed the difference between people who had been given unfair advantages in a game of Monopoly compared to people who had either been given unfair disadvantages or not like a normal game of Monopoly. And the ones with unfair advantages never put their victories down to their unfair advantages. They always put it down to, they just know the game better. They're good at playing Monopoly. There's like, they had inherent skill. The implication is almost like, oh, they're just like everyone else, except they're just built different, right? Which is not really the case. I mean, if you've been given unfair advantages, then of course that will help. Um, but I think the disconnect now is at a point where a lot of nepotistic elites, or a lot of those who are born into multi-generational wealth, the understanding, or the lack of understanding of their inherent popular opinion within society is very dangerous for them. I think because it's all, to some degree, buying into your own delusion is a necessary survival tactic, in order to turn around and say that you did it by yourself, is necessary for you to believe it if you're going to sell that story. But the issue now, I think, more so than what we saw in the past, and this isn't with all elites, but this is with a fair few, at least a large minority, potentially even the majority. It's this idea that they've bought so much into it that they don't feel the need to justify their wealth and their existence to a population, which, if they're not engaged in exploitative behavior, which is usually an oxymoron in the context of you know gaining and developing vast wealth, even in a capitalist system, right? Because, like, I mean, if we look at Jeff Bezos's business model, at the bottom of the rung, the exploitation of the average Amazon worker is the pivotal difference between a multi-million and $1 billion company. Hence why they make the effort to union bust and to um, deprive even the most basic labor needs to these workers. Um, and I think that's, that especially if it's multi generational, somewhere there is it's lost in translation that in order to remain popular among the population, you need to be seen to be giving back in a way that isn't a just for tax breaks or just to further your own ends, but b you need to be seen to be again deserved of this um, acceleration that you've been given. Um, and I think more in terms of for the good of a nation, because this is all social and hierarchical, right? But if we take it back to a more important concept, which is this idea of um, nation building and maintaining one's nation. I mean, in terms of the Venetians, they loaned a huge amount of capital and were involved in a huge amount of political maneuvering in order to keep Venice profitable and free of invasion. Now, this sort of diplomacy, statecraft, and military building is not really undertaken by elites anymore. And so I've seen the argument that we will return to that, and it's going to be a huge dystopia where we're going to see like Jeff Bezos's Amazon army versus like I don't know, like Elon Musk's XAI army or something, um, which I find kind of scary, kind of amusing in both tandems. But I think it's I don't think that that's like the worst side of it. But there is a middle ground in this, which is the problem is now is a lot of elites aren't national, or they don't see themselves as a national citizen. They see themselves as a global citizen, which means they can ruin an economy, they can ruin a country, and they have the means to do that because of their immense wealth and power. But they don't belong to that country, so they can just move to the next one and do the same thing. Um, for them, getting a golden visa or a passport to another country that's either less affluent than the one they've been in, or even just as affluent as the one that they were born in or they live in, is not going to be difficult. Um, and I think if this mic, and I think because of that, there's no there's no feeling or there's no need in their eyes to invest or benefit the country of origin that they're from. It's not like the Venetian question where they will, happily loan out and fund, even for their own benefit, of receiving interest from governments on these loans. There's not even that nationalistic idea of further investing in these countries that they're a part of, or growing economies um, to the benefit of the country in order to increase stability and growth for the country's sake. Um, you know, and it's not like it doesn't benefit them to do this, but again, with offshoring and how much money can be saved, it's easier to offshore and make more money than it is to invest in the country that you are an elite of. And we see this in Europe as well. There's a lot of a lot of European elites who are more interested in going to the club, buying Lambos, and just like speeding late at night, especially the younger nepo babies, than they are in statecraft, diplomacy, and building a country that is ultimately potentially collapsing. Um, and I feel like all of this would be mildly forgivable if, or more forgivable if, these elites pursued other avenues of um, self development that would culturally benefit the nation as a whole. I mean, having a group of elites who can speak multiple languages that come from your country, or that can play multiple instruments and do a whole host of very, not necessarily highbrow, because that's not the concept of being a culturally enriched person. The concept of being a culturally enriched person, well, at least by some philosophers' standards, is to have such a diverse range of cultural experiences and to be able to engage across the board on these cultural experiences, to be able to then integrate culturally almost anywhere. I mean, there will always be barriers to entry, obviously, but here's the thing: if you're an elite, you can overcome those a lot easier, and so being able to engage in this would be a lot more sensible from an elite's point of view, because you can overcome those barriers of entry. So I think this is very fuzzy. This is tickling my neck. Um, I think I think in terms of this, there is there is a, a concept that we can really sort of look at in terms of gaining cultural capital, and in terms of this idea that we need elites to, sort of self justify, and not in a maniac sense, not in a I'm the best because I am, but in a way that is measurable and beneficial to the nations that they're a part of. And I think in an international state system, we need that more than ever. We need elites who, because these elites are often the ones who will have the capital and the connections to end up running the country, to end up, I mean, look at everyone in parliament in the UK. They're all from either Eton or some sort of affluent background. If these people, who they are elites, are not engaging in culturally enriching activities, and um, adding value to the nation that they're meant to be serving, then nations will collapse. That's the thing. These things need a lot of effort, time, and intellect to be put into these systems and these designs, and for reforming if there's need for that. And you can't do that without a foundational base that has you culturally integrated, a, with the country you're from and the country that you're meant to be representing and serving, but also and exploiting as well. It's a two-pronged sword when we're talking about elites, but also in an international state system with a globalized world structure and economy. We can't have, I mean, we can. I mean, people have been talking about retrenchment for a while now, and consolidation, and arguing on whether what the US and Europe and other countries are doing is consolidation or retrenchment. That is another topic for another day. But I think in terms of elites and their function, and their place in the hierarchy, we need them to be culturally adept, not only in the nation of origin, but in the nations of uh, trade, in the nations of defense, in the alliances that we have, in the history of the countries and the peoples that we are looking to engage with, and with our adversaries as well. It's all well and good turning around and, you know, learning French so that we can be closer to the French, and engaging in their cultural delicacies and intricacies. But we also need to be doing the same for Iran, for China, for Russia, because, I mean, as the maxim goes, eh, to know, well, I was going to say to know one's enemy, you must know yourself, but that's the wrong one. But you need to. What I'm thinking of is the old saying, "Keep your friends closer, your enemies closer," which isn't a maxim. Sorry, um, but this is the thing. I mean, all jokes aside, we need to be able to understand not only our allies but our adversaries, and on top of that, we need to be able to have, for example, detente. Yeah, right. We need to be able to, um, stop and pause and be able to negotiate peace, and try and find a level playing field with adversaries, so that we don't end up in a catastrophic global war with nuclear arms ready to go. I nearly burnt my nose off there. Anyway, so this is something that has been on my mind for a while. I think I've been seeing some really interesting and good content around um, the um, sort of the cultural capital argument, and I believe it was Pierre's work on his book, um, on cultural capital, which pertains to elitist behavior and justifications. And I wanted to kind of delve into that, and discuss a little bit more about what we need to see in the future, because it's all well and good being being rich and fancy, but the real question becomes, can we use that to our advantage to make sure that we don't end up with a failed state, uh, war on every border, and alliances that are collapsing? And I think it does come down to the elites, because the elites are the ones who always end up in positions where they make affluent changes to the country, where they run the country, where they engage in business practices that either bolster or hollow out the country of origin. I mean, if we look at the US has lost millions of manufacturing jobs to offshoring. Now, you would think, that's fine, because the growth of companies from the US has boomed. These companies have made huge profits by offshoring, but the country doesn't see that. The country doesn't benefit from that to the same extent as having millions more jobs in manufacturing, where you have normal people who can put into the tax system, who can have disposable income to spend, and where you have working age men and women contributing to the society that they live in. The corporations, unfortunately, their profit margins are high and their tax per profit is low. That's they will always try and find ways around tax, um, and I don't blame them. Tax is a pain in the ass, but these are what is needed to make a country function. You need a strong population. You need a working population. You need these and the argument is for Western society and capitalism is that social mobility should be available to all. And with the deep entrenchment of the elite now, as they grow their wealth and they cut off, you know, chances and advancements for lower socioeconomic backgrounds to grow and work up that ladder, because now that ladder has no rungs in it. Those rungs have been taken out and sold for scrap metal, to make a bit more money for the elites that are sitting already at the top of the ladder, and that poses an issue when we look at the whole picture, the grand strategy. America, I think, partially is in decline because the working class has been hollowed out. The middle class has been hollowed out. There's, you know, you need a strong foundation, and you need elites who can understand that. You need elites who are trained in statecraft, in diplomacy, and in nation building, to understand that you can't just chase the next quarter's profit margin and continue like that forever. The decline will happen at some point. There will be no profit left to glean. Um, I remember, well, it must have been a year or two ago now, when Wall Street got very excited that they had now re-innovated the exchange so that retirement funds can bet on the Wall Street market. And this is purely just done because they've run out of other sources of revenue to tap in and other profit makers to extract wealth from. Now they're going to take your 401k, and that's what will you be left with? um, so you need elites, because here's the thing: policy, governance, all of these things are a top down. It's all top down. That in order to have a strong base, you need a strong top as well. I mean, you can't have one without the other. You can't have the other without one. It's a three musketeer situation. Um, and because of that, you need to be able to turn around and have elites who can understand the delicacies of this, understand the global situation, and be able to engage culturally, not just with the people in their own nation, but also the people who are adversaries to them as well, and not just have them hop on the next flight out to Doha when the going gets tough, or hop from the next flight out of Doha to Singapore when the going gets tough in Singapore, right? So I think this is an important topic. I just wanted to touch on it. I feel like there's a lot to be discussed here. There's a lot more depth that can be achieved, but I think that's what I wanted to say on it for now. So anyway, thank you for listening, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one. Keep smoking.